What's going on, everybody? Welcome to After Prison Show, and today I want to talk to you about a very serious topic. This is actually a huge story in the news right now, and this is the suicide of Aaron Hernandez, former NFL All-Star who ended up being sentenced to life in prison for a murder charge. This story reaches me on a very personal level for a number of reasons. One, because I actually know of guys myself who killed themselves while locked up. I will be telling you about that in this video as well. And two, Aaron Hernandez used to play for my favorite football team, the New England Patriots. I know there's a lot of you out there who probably can't stand the Patriots, and I completely respect that. But this story is just absolutely insane to me to think about the fact that this guy, Aaron Hernandez, went from a possible all-star football career to being found guilty of murder and then sentenced to life in prison. And in fact, this guy was just in the news a few days ago for beating 2 additional murder charges. Allegedly, he was in a club, somebody spilled a drink on him, and then some kind of way he ended up being charged in 2 additional murders, but he was just found not guilty of those. You know, I can remember watching this guy play in the NFL, and the crazy thing about this is while I was watching this guy play, I was in prison myself. But I can remember just how great of a football player this guy really was. I mean, he was a huge addition to my squad. 2 huge boss tight ends. On one side, I've got Gronkowski. On the other side, I had Hernandez. And I can remember anytime that Hernandez would catch a touchdown pass, he would do his little dance in the end zone. Show me the money, or I'm getting paid, or pay me, or I'm eating, whatever the hell that actually meant. But it's crazy to think how this guy went from being on the road to basically an all-star football career to then going to prison to serve a life sentence. How this guy's life just completely went from absolute positivity to the worst negative situation it could possibly be in. I remember when the allegations first came out that this guy was being charged with murder and how New England absolutely dropped him immediately, completely cut all ties with this guy whatsoever, wouldn't even speak on the situation. I remember how when this murder case first came to light and these pictures began to surface of Aaron Hernandez posting pictures on social media holding the actual murder weapon, and I'm thinking to myself, man, this is just the stupidest thing you could possibly do if you actually did this. And you know, he was found guilty, so who's to say if he really did or if he didn't, but he most certainly had the murder weapon in those social media pictures. So I'm quite sure that helps to make this guy pretty fucking guilty. But you know, being locked up to serve any amount of time, it affects everyone differently. Aaron Hernandez had a life sentence. He realized he was never coming home. He had probably already exhausted all of his appeal efforts, and he knew that this was it for him. Unless he was going to be able to figure out some mastermind prison break escapist type of a plan, which in all likelihood is absolutely unrealistic, he was going to spend the rest of his life locked up in a cell. And I don't know what that feels like exactly. I don't know what it feels like to be locked up and to realize that you're never coming home. But I can only imagine from all of the time that I spent locked up myself personally, the many, many years, I can imagine that coming to that realization that you never will see the free world again, it can definitely make suicide a very real possibility in your mind. And I mean, during the 7 years that I just served myself, suicide was a very real possibility in my mindset as well at the very beginning of my time. I was in such a dark place that I wanted to kill myself personally. Now, this was before I was actually sentenced to the 7 years. This was when I was still dealing with my actual case, not knowing how much time I was actually going to be sentenced to, thinking this could be, metaphorically speaking, football numbers, 12, 15, 20 plus years. So suicide was definitely weighing heavy on my mind at that time. And I gotta be honest with you, I came very, very close to actually ending myself while I was locked up. There was no mention in the news with this Aaron Hernandez situation as to whether or not he actually left a suicide note. Now, he potentially could have, and they just have not released that yet. But there is the very real likelihood that he didn't. And to just think that if you were ready to kill yourself, and that is what you're about to do, and you don't even want to leave a note to let anybody know why, goodbye, anything like that. You can just imagine with the fact that you're just about to kill yourself and you're not even going to say anything about it on paper to anyone. You can just imagine what kind of mindset a person has to be in to actually feel like it's not even worth the effort to put anything down on paper. The way I feel about it is you must honestly think that just nobody gives a fuck about you at all. And who cares if they do? Fuck it. Your life is over. It's about to end right now. And there's no need for words at all. That's a pretty sad thing to think about. But like I said at the beginning of this video, I know of guys who actually did this themselves while I was locked up. Guys who killed themselves. And the crazy thing about it is one of these guys, he only had like 2 or 3 years at the most to serve. This was such a crazy situation. This was a young kid. This kid was nothing but like 19 or 20 years old. And this kid actually hanged and killed himself while he was in solitary confinement, sitting in the hole. And what's also crazy about this is I knew this kid. I knew him. I dealt with him while at the prison. This was at the very last prison that I was at, the one that I would be released from. And this prison also housed a lot of different offenders, basically. You had violent offenders, youth offenders, drug offenders, behavioral offenders. The one thing you really did not have at this prison, I don't think there was any of. There may have been, I just didn't really know. But you really did not have sex offenders at this prison. In fact, I don't even think they qualified to be at this prison. But this kid who actually killed himself, he was one of these youth offenders. He got locked up at 18 years old and he was sentenced to this program. And this program was at this prison. This was a youth offender program. And the only way that you are released from prison once you're sentenced to this youth offender program is you have to complete this program. Now, this program can be completed in something like up to 3 years or at the earliest, I think like 2 years. But this young kid was definitely not doing good by this program's standards. In fact, this young kid was getting in all sorts of trouble. I can remember this kid liked to fight a lot. He used to consider himself like training for UFC type fighting. And he also was involved in gangs as well. And while involved with this gang that he was, while most of the prisoners were out on the rec yard, he actually came back into the housing unit, broke into the locker of another prisoner, stole all of that prisoner's commissary, and then hid it in another locker and then went back outside. Well, I don't know exactly what happened after that, but I do know that this kid actually got caught for breaking into this guy's locker, taking all of his commissary. I mean, there are cameras inside of these prison housing units. They're able to see quite a bit with those cameras, and I'm pretty sure that is how this guy got caught for stealing the commissary from this other prisoner. But I can remember prison officials came out on the rec yard looking for this guy. I can remember this guy specifically like trying to hide on the rec yard, trying not to be found by these prison officials because he already knew he was about to get locked up for stealing this commissary from this other guy. And then they found him. They put him in handcuffs and then they walked his ass to solitary confinement. I'll never forget watching this. And the reason is because of what actually happened when he got to solitary confinement. Well, while he was back in isolation, back in the hole, he wasn't doing any better back there. In fact, he was raising all sorts of hell back there, flooding his cell, doing just all sorts of crazy shit, constantly kicking on the door. This is how it was told to me from other prisoners who were back there with him during this time. Well, he got into an altercation with this female correctional officer, and they were arguing as he was being led back into his isolation cell, probably either coming back from taking a shower or from being out on the little dog kennel-like isolation rec yard. But while he was being walked back to his cell with this female guard, they were arguing, and as he was put back in his cell and she took the handcuffs off of him, he grabbed his cell door like however he could because there's no handles on the inside of these cells, but he just grabbed that cell door and tried to close it. And when he did so, he closed it right on this female guard's hand. It like broke her hand or something. Now, there was a lot of controversy that surrounded all of this because a lot of people tried to say that this female officer instigated this entire argument with this guy. And that's the part of the story that I don't know if it's true or not, but it is a very real possibility. Some of these guards, whether male or female, are the nastiest, most miserable motherfuckers on the face of the planet, and they love to do nothing other than to instigate prisoners to try to rebel. It's like they get off on that type of stuff. And if that's the case in this situation, well, then this guard got exactly what she was looking for. For this prisoner to rebel, she ended up getting her hand smashed in the door and breaking her hand. So I'm sure she wasn't really looking for that part of it. But once this happened, you can imagine this young kid's life back in isolation became nothing but hell. He assaulted a female staff member and broke her hand in the process. You can imagine there is a very real possibility and likelihood that other correctional officers came in there, probably beat the hell out of him for doing this, and also told him that he was going to be taken back to court and actually face additional charges for assaulting a correctional officer, which carries like 5 or more years. Now again, he was already doing like 2 or 3 years with this program, which again, he wasn't doing well with at all. And even if they took him to court and gave him this additional 5 years, even with that, he would still have another chance at life. Somewhere during all of this time that he potentially would be serving, there would have been a chance for him to get it together and have another chance at life. But when this happened, when this guard's hand was broken, and when he found out they were going to be taking him back to court to face additional charges, that must have been the breaking point for this young kid. And it was then that he actually hanged and killed himself inside of his cell, like a 19 or 20-year-old kid. You know what's even crazier than all of this is the fact that I knew this female guard personally. Not like on a really personal level, but I dealt with this person and I knew what her attitude was like. This was the most bipolar correctional guard there was. Because one day she would be like the coolest person in the world, just so happy-go-lucky and friends with all of the prisoners. And on the next day, she would be the most spiteful, venomous, vicious, vindictive piece of shit guard there was at the prison. And a lot of prisoners knew her personality was like this. So even on days when she would try to be cool, nobody liked her at all, because they knew the next day she would come in there and be this completely different, miserable, and evil person. But do you know, after this situation happened, after she got her hand broken, after this kid killed himself, I wondered if I would be able to see that this affected her in any way. And to be honest with you, it didn't appear that it did at all. In fact, she carried on the exact same way. Trying to be cool one day, being a complete piece of shit the very next. You would think that even if she didn't blame herself for this situation, which I'm not saying she should or she shouldn't, but you would think that because a prisoner killed themselves after an altercation with you in particular, this would affect you in some type of a way that would make you just a little more humanized. But it didn't do that at all. It's pretty fucking crazy, actually. You know, serving time is all what you make of it. It can either be the most miserable, fucked up experience of your life, which in most cases, it's going to be no matter how you try to make it. But you can also try to make the very most of it that you can. You can try your damnedest to not let it beat you down physically, mentally, and emotionally, and try like all hell to make something good of that negative situation. And there are some who are able to do that, and there are some who just are not. And personally, I myself was almost someone who wasn't able to do that. Suicide is a very real part of being locked up. In fact, it probably happens a lot more than you even realize. Guys kill themselves all the time while locked up, because in a lot of cases, some people just can't handle the fact that they're going to be locked up for however much time. And one last thing that's very ironic, creepy, kind of scary that I want to throw into this is that during the time when I was first arrested, going through this really, really dark period of my life, being locked up, not knowing how much time I would be sentenced to, and actually really thinking about wanting to kill myself during this time, I can remember sitting in isolation. I had like 14 100 milligram Seroquel pills. I've mentioned this before, but what I don't think I've really ever mentioned is that while I was sitting in isolation, thinking all of this crazy shit, I was reminded of the fact that just a few years prior in this same jail, in this same exact cell block, hell, I even thought that it was potentially in the same exact cell that I was in, that a very good friend of mine from the free world ended up getting locked up, facing something like 5 years. But because of the fact that he was facing these 5 years, and because of the fact that him and his wife had this very, very crazy relationship, and he just could not handle thinking about what she would be doing while he was going to be locked up for those 5 years, he actually hanged himself in the same exact jail, in the same exact cell block. And who's to even say if it was in the same exact cell that I was in while I was facing all of this time that I was. So not only was I dealing with these super dark times, not knowing what was going to come of the situation I was in, and already starting to think about suicide myself, I was also reminded of almost every single day while in this solitary confinement housing unit and cell that this is exactly the same place that a good friend of mine did the exact same thing that I'm thinking about doing myself. It took every bit of fight and strength within me to make sure that I didn't do that. And to be honest with you, I'm really glad I did. Hey, look, that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did so, please leave a like and a comment letting me know exactly what you thought about it. As always, until next time, please enjoy life, the free world, never take a moment for granted, and make the most of every day. Peace!